Our next speaker is Dave Johnson, presenting The Portrait of Bencino Brugnolaio and Diverse Things, genre blending in Giovanna Garzoni's Old Man from Artemino for a Medici Prince. Dave.
In 1648, portraitist, miniaturist, and still life painter Giovanna Garzoni was commissioned by Prince Don Lorenzo de' Medici to create The Old Man from Artemino, a sizable painting in tempera on parchment. The request by the prince was for a portrait of a certain Bencino Brugnolaio, together with many other objects, which resulted in a unique picture within Garzoni's repertoire and represents a rare example during the period of a painting that fused the artistic genres of portraiture, still life, and landscape painting. In the picture, Garzoni applied her characteristic precision to depict a resplendent array of items, including foodstuffs, a quirky Bracco hunting dog, domestic and wild birds, dead game, a straw basket brimming with eggs, a straw-covered flask, a delicate china bowl full of ricotta cheese, a large everyday chipped bowl of painted clay with a cut cantaloupe, and a smooth earthen jar all carefully arranged in a landscape setting. In the foreground, the terrain serves as a table for the bounty. To the left of the middle ground, a rocky outcrop rises skyward from a base of seemingly organized slabs and boulders. As a counterpoint, a mature bearded peasant appears on the right, donning a tall brimless woven hat. Only his torso appears before the mountainous landscape. Turned toward the terrain-is table, he cradles two live hens with his gaze directed to the viewer in a half-length portrait. A blue sky with supple clouds banking occupies the upper tier of the composition and crowns at its base a receding mountain range in a light, almost luminous shade. Rendered by Garzoni's brush with acute attention to the most minute aspect of each item, a buoyant synthesis emerges in a deliciously novel work. By the time of Don Lorenzo's commission for the painting, he had built an impressive art collection for his residence at the Medici Villa of La Petraia, located a short distance northwest of Florence. However, shortly after the commission, Don Lorenzo died, and the completed painting entered the collection of his nephew, Grand Duke Ferdinando II de' Medici, and his consort, Vittoria della Rovere, at the Medici Villa of Poggio Imperiale, south of the city center. The recent studies on Giovanna Garzoni's career by Sheila Barker and Anatole Cecchin's entry for The Old Man from Artemino in the catalog of the 2020 Garzoni exhibition in Florence provide exhaustive bibliographies of published references of the painting. Gerardo Casale's studies present insights into the commission and invoices, and the scholarship of Evelina Barea and Ferdinando Chiostri have revealed Don Lorenzo's art collections and agricultural production at La Petraia. Alan Grieco has illuminated the social and political aspects of early modern food consumption. Collectively, this scholarship provides an opportunity to re-examine the painting and its significance for its patron and artist. The Old Man from Artemino, Garzoni's most eclectic work and the only one she ever produced of its kind, has never been contextualized in its originally intended setting at La Petraia, Don Lorenzo's primary residence and the home of his art collections. Today, I propose that the painting presents an ideal tableau with specific social meanings relevant to Don Lorenzo, and that the painting would have complemented other paintings at his villa. This inquiry begins with an overview of the documentation for the painting's commission and later provenance history, then focuses on La Petraia during Don Lorenzo's lifetime and his art collections there, and turns to The Old Man from Artemino, contextualizing it within Don Lorenzo's picture gallery. Finally, we will consider how the period beholder would have viewed items in the painting, suggesting that the ingenious blending of genres resulted from a collaboration between Don Lorenzo and Giovanna Garzoni, and that it represents a more extensive creative partnership between the Medici prince and his artist. The commission in 1648 by Don Lorenzo for the painting differed significantly from those by other patrons during Garzoni's career, which were typically for portraits or for still life paintings. The Accademia Nazionale di San Luca archives in Rome and the State Archives in Florence hold 4 critical documents concerning Don Lorenzo's request that scholars have uncovered that enable us to understand the circumstances of the painting's original commission, the invoice, the payment, and a later inventory. The first document, conserved in Rome, where Garzoni was living when she died, is from her own notebook. She records that Don Lorenzo presented her with a commission that reads, "His Most Serene Highness, Don Lorenzo, ordered from me a large sheet with diverse things and with the portrait of Bencino Brugnolaio." We have no further record regarding Don Lorenzo's request. On the 15th of November, 1648, shortly after this entry, Don Lorenzo suddenly died. Garzoni now had a commissioned painting, but had no patron to pay for it. She documents the painting a second time in 1649, recording an invoice she sent for the finished picture to Grand Duke Ferdinando II de' Medici, Don Lorenzo's nephew, describing the work as that piece with Bencino Brugnolaio and diverse things of much labor. Essentially, she was looking to be paid for the required effort. A third document, this one in Florence, penned by Duke Ferdinando II's secretary, corroborates Garzoni's note of the invoice. Dated the 8th of November, 1649, it notes, "Giovanna Garzoni presented a petition to your highness, Grand Duke Ferdinando II de' Medici, that she had completed several highly detailed works for Lord Prince Don Lorenzo without having received any compensation, and she begged of your highness to order that she be paid. The given proposal was 100 scudi." The fourth document should be considered in the likelihood that Ferdinando II paid Garzoni for the painting and then gifted it to his consort, Vittorio della Rovere, a collector of Garzoni's work. This record of the painting appears in an inventory of the Medici Villa of Poggio Imperiale from 1691, taken over 40 years after Don Lorenzo died and more than 20 years after Garzoni died. It assigns an attribution of origin for the man in the painting for the first time. The scribe records the work as a view of a mountainous landscape with the old man of Artemino. From that point forward, the old man from Artemino became the picture's title, which some scholars suggest sets the painting near the Villa Medici of Artemino, some 37 kilometers west of Florence. Other scholars have remarked that the landscape bears no resemblance to that area, and the debate is whether it depicts a specific or an imaginary place. It becomes evident that over time, the painting's originally intended context and the identity of its human subject became obscured. By reviewing Don Lorenzo's life at La Petraia, we can more profitably consider Garzoni's picture in association with other paintings in his collection there. By 1600, the year of Don Lorenzo's birth, La Petraia had developed into an agricultural estate for food production for the court and as hunting land. In 1609, he inherited the property. As the youngest son of Ferdinando I, he had very few court obligations. Don Lorenzo's life at the villa, which became his primary residence around 1620, provided him a role within the dynasty as the proprietor of a productive estate and afforded him space to build an art collection. By 1630, he had completed a redesign of his vineyards and built pergolas for his citrus trees. By 1640, he had a significant production of high-quality fruit and wine. In addition, his art collection was also evolving in a creative and original way. Although Don Lorenzo's villa has undergone modifications, his impact is still visible today. In 1636, he commissioned Il Volterrano to paint several walls of frescoes adorning the villa's central courtyard, depicting Medici pageantry. Heralding the family Medici legends, the immense work set the backdrop for Don Lorenzo's picture gallery. And after his death in a 1649 inventory of his collection at La Petraia, his interest in genre-blended paintings is revealed. A typical example is by an obscure Tuscan painter, Giovanni Pini, in his 1633 Young Man with Food in the Open Air, A seated youth rests against a tree trunk with a plethora of still life objects in an open landscape setting. Factoring the prince's specific request that Garzoni create a portrait with numerous still life objects, and that after creating the old man from Artemino, such a painting never materialized in her work again, it is reasonable to affirm that the patron played a crucial role in the conception of these genre-blended works. Considering a few of the many diverse things in the old man from Artemino, we will also see that Garzoni's painting delivered a Tuscan buffet that spoke directly to Don Lorenzo's interest in ways that intended viewers would have recognized. First, the hunting dog. Garzoni depicts to the far left edge of the painting the intelligent and good-natured Italian Bracco was a favorite breed of both the Medici and Gonzaga families. In a 1624 letter, the Duchess of Mantua, Caterina de' Medici, details sending her brother, Don Lorenzo, the most desirable gift of prized Bracci puppies. The Bracco, considered the oldest breed of pointer hunting dog in Europe, dates to the 4th century. Dante celebrated them in his Rime, Bracci bellowing and hunters howling. Don Lorenzo spent considerable financial resources raising his hunting dogs, and his inventories contain numerous firearms for hunting. Garzoni's Bracco in the painting leans into the frame and gazes wistfully with an inquisitive look, perhaps directly toward the beholder. At the front edge of Garzoni's stone table, she depicts tart cherries, an example of a fruit at the top of the great chain of being, a theory during the period that assigned a value structure to the natural world, including to all edible plants and animals. In this discussion, the hierarchy refers to social structure and diet. The cherries, which grew high off the ground, were regarded as food for the upper classes. The prized crop at La Patria is referenced in the surviving letters from 1638 between Monsignor Lodovico Incontri, the architect and art appraiser for Don Lorenzo, and Galileo Galilei, the astronomer and an early tutor for the prince. While residing with Don Lorenzo, Incontri sent Galileo 2 flasks of sour cherry wine from La Patria, demonstrating how gifts of such fruits from the Medici estate could serve as tokens of favor and prestige. In the center foreground of the painting are 2 hybrid citrons, known as Bizzaria, first produced in Florence in 1640. It was a hybrid version of the citrus that had arrived from Asia during the 9th century. This is one of the earliest paintings recorded of this new cultivar in Tuscany, which Garzoni renders from nature. By the end of the century, the Medici had devised a system to record and catalog the multitude of citrus varieties in their gardens. The delicate china bowl filled with ricotta cheese to the left of the center represents one of the highly sought foreign ceramics in the Medici collections, or a dish from the local Medici porcelain workshops established in the 1560s to bypass the import expense from the Far East. Either way, the depiction of serving soft cheese on Asian or Asian-inspired ceramics was fashionable among the elite. The painted clay serving bowl with a cut cantaloupe represents another example in the hierarchy of the chain of being. In this case, the melon, a ground dweller, is depicted in this rough, ordinary dish, signifying it as a lower status food in its corresponding container. The meticulously rendered fly on the melon showcases Garzoni's innovative use of Galileo's microscope, taking full advantage of the cutting-edge science and technology of her time. We have reviewed the available archival documents, considered the research in Renaissance food studies, and recontextualized Giovanna Garzoni's The Old Man from Artemino within its originally intended setting at Don Lorenzo's residence, the Medici Villa of La Patria, focusing on how period beholders may have understood items in the painting and detailing how it aligns with typical examples in Don Lorenzo's art collection, reveals the prince as a creative, imaginative patron developing a collection of hybrid paintings at the time of his death, and that Giovanna Garzoni's extraordinary genre blending in a painting she identified in her own words as a portrait of Bencino Brunellesco and diverse things represents the apogee of an ambitious, ingenious partnership between a patron prince, Don Lorenzo de' Medici, and his artist. Thank you.